I don't really like people's kind of attitude.
Right.
I think they're very, emotional, verbally rude.
Imagine a nostalgic childhood where you and your siblings shared countless precious memories. You could never imagine that as time went by, one of them would aim a loaded gun at you and pull the trigger. On a Thursday night of October 4th, 2012, it was 11:15 p.m. when 17-year-old Jake Evans made his way to his room, where he pulled out a loaded revolver he had stolen from his grandfather and ascended the staircase toward his sister's room, knocked on the door, and a few minutes later, shot her, once in the back and once in the head, and immediately ran into the study and shot his mother 1, 2, and 3 times. A nostalgic childhood, a life filled with precious memories, siblings growing up together, tragedy strikes, a loaded gun becomes a weapon of violence, family tears apart by the psychotic act that unfolded within the confines of their own once peaceful home. This is the scene left by 17 years old Jake Evans. Before we continue further, we'd like to send our deepest condolences to the loved ones of Mallory Evans and Jamie Evans for the actions of Jacob Ryan Evans. Our hearts go out to the remaining family for their tragic loss. Aledo, Texas, a wealthy and quiet city with beautiful natural scenery, including lakes, creeks, several parks nearby where families can enjoy picnics, hikes, and other outdoor activities. A typical place where every wealthy family dreams to live. This is exactly where the Evans decided to find their home. The family had nothing to envy those around the corner. Their home nestled on a 2-acre lot inside a gated community, which was a symbol of their comfortable lifestyle. Jake's parents, Daryl and Jamie, along with their younger sister Mallory, enjoyed the tranquility of the seemingly idyllic setting before darkness loomed. Jacob Jake Ryan Evans, born on May 22, 1995, entered the world as the third child of Daryl and Jamie Evans. Completing the family unit were his siblings, Emily Coletti, Audrey Elise Evans, and Mallory Evans, listed in descending order from age. Hailing from an affluent neighborhood in Aledo, Texas, Jake spent his formative years enveloped in the comforts of his surroundings. Jake embarked on his educational journey at Aledo High School, where he pursued his studies until January 2012. It was during this period that he decided to withdraw from traditional schooling, opting for a homeschooling arrangement. Mallory, his sister, had already began homeschooling 2 years earlier, paving the way for Jake's transition to this alternative approach to education. Jake appeared to be a shy and quiet boy who lived with his parents and was described as a quiet teenager who stayed out of trouble. But the problem was, as Jacob progressed through high school, he increasingly grew frustrated with the behaviors exhibited by his peers. The sight of bullying and discrimination among them became unbearable for him, as he perceived these traits as deeply immoral. Could it be that Jake opted for homeschooling as a means to distance himself from such behavior? Jack's distress grew as he witnessed repugnant actions within his own family, with his younger sister Mallory, who was adopting the self-centered qualities he despised. One such occasion, according to his written voluntary statement, was earlier that day when he committed this crime. He and his little sister Mallory had gone to the allergist for his appointment, and his sister made a racist comment about a black man that was mowing the grass. According to him, this wasn't the first time Mallory had made fun of people. She once made fun of a homeless man as well. Could this have been the reason for his wicked act on October 4th, 2012? It was a typical day for the Evans family on that fateful Thursday, a day for lounging around for the family. Jack had an appointment with his allergist the day before, After the appointment, he went out to lunch with his mother and his sister Mallory. When they got home, Jake took off to his room, where he began his mental preparation for killing his family. He sat and watched the movie Halloween for the third time that week. He had been obsessing over this movie for a very long time. In the movie, Michael Myers, a well-known fictional serial killer, after committing so many murders, showed no signs of remorse or guilt, giving the appearance that murdering people who, quote, deserved it was easy. At least that's how Jake perceived it. Through Halloween, Jake could visualize his murderous fantasies. But after a while, it was no longer enough. He wanted to try it for himself, and he had already chosen his targets, his family. Jake proceeded to dispose of the film, hoping no one would find it and conclude that it influenced his decision to kill. After that, he went into the backyard to enjoy some golf. He spent about an hour just hitting golf balls around the yard like an innocent child who has nothing sinister in mind. Then, by 4 p.m., he headed up to his room to watch some movies. 10 minutes later, he was interrupted by Mallory, who asked if he would like to watch a movie together. With Jake still mad at her for her behaviors toward people of different races or social status, Jake said no, and Mallory went back to her room. With that anger still fluctuating inside him, Jake went and grabbed a blue foldable knife and put it in his pocket and made his way back to his room. He contemplated his decision, pacing in his mind different scenes of the movie, especially that moment when Michael took the knife, looking his victim in the eyes, and stabbed them. He started to think of how he could adapt this scene to his sister with no fail, imagining how he could stab his sister to death. Getting in his mind the thought of inflicting so much pain on her was too much for him to bear. Still, the many times that she had hurt his feelings or upset him continued to flood his mind. Around 5:30 p.m., Jake sat quietly, contemplating in the living room about how he should go about killing his family. He sat for about an hour and a half, planning on how he would go about killing everyone. Then, around 9:30 p.m., he headed up to Mallory's room and asked if she wanted to watch The Waterboy together. Mallory plopped down on the couch in their upstairs entertainment area, and Jake started the movie. Unknown to Mallory, Jake was plotting her death at that very moment. Jake excused himself to go to the art room, where he stood for 30 minutes, imagining how he would go about taking her life all over again. He came back and sat on the sofa with the knife in his pocket, and about 5 minutes later, he playfully threw a pillow at her, and they both started to have a memorable pillow fight. A typical scene of an amazing childhood with love, joy, and laughing. Those moments he spent with his beloved before committing this horrific tragedy. Suddenly, he realized that he didn't want his family to suffer. He didn't want to take their life so brutally, so he decided to kill them both, but with a .22 revolver stolen from his grandfather, and then spent an hour walking nervously around the house, thinking how could he take the life of his sister Mallory, who he sees at the time like a racist and an annoying sister. Jake starts to imagine how life could never be the same if she wasn't there anymore, how he could never see her again with many scenarios, thinking over and over that what happened next is a disaster. After passing different scenes in his mind, Jake decided it was time. Time for what, you may ask? You will soon discover. Before starting his show, he made sure he knew where his mom was, and then headed to Mallory's room. After standing there for a few moments, he knocked on her door, telling her their mom wanted to see her downstairs. Mallory opened the door and stepped out of her room and glanced over to see something pointed at her head. That's when Mallory saw Jake was holding the gun, now pointed at her face. At this moment, she thought he was joking. Mallory chuckled and told him to stop because it was freaking her out. She started to walk toward the stairs. It was at this moment that Jake shot her once in the back and once in the head, and she fell to the bottom of the staircase. Obviously, his mom might have heard the shot, so he ran quickly towards her, giving her no time to think and escape. he immediately ran into the study and shot his mother 3 times. You may ask, what happened next? Well, after his cold-blooded act, he began to feel the weight of his actions. He rushed into his room, screaming at himself, saying how messed up he was for killing his mother and sister. He began to empty the shells onto his bed. But then, he heard a noise from downstairs. It was Mallory. She was still alive. Engulfed in a sea of emotions, Jake quickly reloaded the gun and ran downstairs to his sister while shouting that he was sorry for what he had done. He worked quickly to end her suffering by shooting her in the head again. As fast as possible, he returned to his mother and shot her in the head again as well, just to be sure. He placed the pistol on the counter and picked up their phone and called 911.
Concord County 911, where is your emergency?
My house.
Okay, what's the emergency?
I just killed my mom and my sister.
What?
1. About 30 minutes later, the cops showed up and arrested him. Jake's actions were unapologetic and wicked. The 17-year-old boy, killed, testified that he had been inspired by the movie Halloween. Do you think this movie could have been the only catalyst that drove Jake to kill his mother and sister? Maybe yes, but let's not forget that the relationship with the teenager and his family wasn't the best we could describe. He later confessed that he intended to kill not only his mom and younger sister, but also his older sisters and grandparents. Sadly for his mom, Jamie Evans, and sister Mallory. How could a once idyllic family dynamic turn into a terrifying nightmare, leading to the disappearance of love and trust, leaving behind only the haunting question of why? After surrendering without resistance upon his arrest, Jake wrote a detailed 4-page confession outlining the events leading to the murder, offering some vague insights into his motive. Deemed mentally unfit for trial, he spent over 2 years in a state mental hospital. Despite a bond of $750,000, his father expressed no intention of paying it. Finally, released from the hospital on April 27, 2015, Jake was considered mentally stable for trial. He was scheduled for about a week later. When he entered the courtroom, he still bore the resemblance of the frail 17-year-old who committed the crime 2.5 years prior. Jake pled guilty to 2 counts of capital murder and was sentenced to 2 consecutive 45-year prison terms in the Darrington facility in Brazoria County, Texas. He must serve a minimum of 22 years before being eligible for parole. The case of Jake Evans had a similarity with the murder of Casey Jo Stoddart, who was murdered by 2 of her high school classmates, who later arrested, accused being inspired by the movie Scream. Let me ask you, is this a sufficient reason to kill someone? Whether or not Jake Evans was seemingly motivated by the movie Halloween, he later apologized sincerely to his family and the community. Jake expressed remorse for the pain he had caused. The family, without holding a grudge, released a statement signed by 11 members expressing their desire to close this chapter and continue healing together. Let me ask you this. If you were one of the family members, would you forgive Jake Evans?